This next guy, he didn't know me when I saw this photo. I saw him in a cafe. Maybe you remember the 50th Street, the Cherry Street Coffee House. It's where Pearcey is now. We all used to hang out there in the 80s, 90s. And I saw this guy wearing an armband. Yeah, that's it. Wearing an armband. It's the first time I ever saw anybody in mourning with a black armband on. I didn't know what he was crying about. I thought it was the coolest thing I'd ever seen in my life. Because I'd only read about it in Dojo. And to see it in person for like one cup of coffee that lasted 3 hours was just the most amazing kind of sentiment to me. And I've never forgotten it. I bring it up to him too often, every time I see him. But I'm not going to talk about it any more tonight. I'm just going to tell you. His career has been city planning, high tech, art direction, and political control. He's on talk radio, and he writes a column for Urban Tulsa. It's called Seascape. He gets to talk about everything that we do here. He gets to talk about planning, he gets to talk about politics, anything that's on our minds, mostly what's on his mind. His current fascination is helping this one. Science and the amateur. And I think he may be the expert amateur? Something like that? The talented amateur? Anyway, it's an exploration in astronomy, space science, synthetic biology. I'm just going to say beyond because it seems like it's bigger than all that. So this is Ray Pearcey.
Engaging in a controlled experiment tonight. I've had 3 drinks. I've never had 3 drinks prior to a presentation of any kind, so we'll see how it goes.
Where we go?
No, it seems the microphone is that my fault? Okay. Okay, so do I get extra time for
Hold
this?
it. Hold it.
Sure. What we have in America, and maybe across the planet, is this disruption, this monstrous gap between the scientific and the technological community and the rest of the society. And I wanted to talk a little about that and some counter trends. The earlier slide, there's a couple of 17-year-old kids who've launched a space balloon into space, and then there's the CERN guy who has a $10 million facility at his disposal, and he's doing science. And here you see big science. It's the thing that animates, in a lot of ways, our current world. Giant telescopes, fusion reactors, the CERN project, the Genome project is huge, complex, multifaceted projects that require billions. And then, of course, we have computing, these giant machines that do trillions of computations every second. I've had one at my disposal briefly, did a little animation project. I tell you, it's intoxicating. And we're going to have one here in Tulsa, actually. And here we have the past. The past in science on the planet is a very different period from our own. Amateurs were highly material. We had Ada Lovelace, the first computer programmer, about a century and a half ago. Darwin, who was sort of a theologian and a naturalist. Michael Faraday, who until he was 16 couldn't write his name. And Isaac Newton, of course, who was a theologian and a God guy. So we've got the 2 cultures. C.P. Snow, English guy, 1950s. He notes, he's a novelist and a scientist, he notes that there's sort of a difference between the 2 cultures and thinks that, it's problematic, very problematic. And in later writings he says, maybe there's some convergence. And then in the 90s, late 90s, John Brockman writes a piece called The Third Culture about this convergence that in fact he sees underway. People like Stephen Johnson, writer, and others who are writing about the interface between the humanities and technology and science. And then all these wonderful people, Arthur C. Clarke, Eddie Lamar, the actress who's also radar and an amazing radio sensor innovator, Levy, who was an amateur astronomer, Herbie Hancock, who delved into science and acoustics. There's some other people. Science, the talented amateur. This is at the core of what I wanted to talk about this evening. And it's at the core of counterpunching the anti-intellectualism, anti-science, anti-evidence thing that's an infection. It's a terrible infection. I hate it. Okay, so what's the counter? We've got the SETI project from the early 90s, a search for extraterrestrial intelligence, which was chronicled in Sagan's film, what was that film called? Contact. And I represented it here. And you could go to that site, download all kinds of stuff to search for intelligent stuff. And this is a pharmaceutical, drug, and computational chemistry site where you could do the same thing. Amateurs helping the main crew do the next thing. A fabulous site, again in the late 90s. I played around with it. I stayed up for 4 nights one night and got into a lot of trouble at work the next day. And then there's the whole business of ecology and environmental monitoring. My friend Russ Burkhardt, who's here in the audience, suggested we Tulsans put together a fracking watch application so we can watch fracking companies as they do their business, which we can all appreciate, but also mess around with the environment, which needs to stop. And this is one of my heroes, film director Mr. Cameron, who is a super amateur. He has the money to build and exploit super little tiny submarines that take him to the bottom of the planet, bottom of the ocean. And this is another part of the talented stuff that's afoot in science. We have a supercomputing facility which is going to be broadly available not only to professional scientists and computational folks, but to filmmakers and artists and industrial designers and other folks. It's in City Hall, will be in City Hall, should be underway at some point later in the year. All of this stuff is made possible in part by sensors. I mean, if you can build a cheap sensor, you can monitor fracking, you can monitor air pollution, you can monitor the health of thousands of Tulsans and replicate that and create a kind of model of how Tulsans are doing metabolically and from a physical standpoint. And this is a representation of just that. This is an article from Wired magazine called The Measured Life. I wear this little sensor that's recording my